Test 1, 2, 3. We're going on the record. Good morning. Welcome to the Maryland Public Service Commission. This is case number 8903. This is our annual hearing to review the EUSP program that the Commission has oversight for, but is administered by the Department of Human Services Office of Home Energy Programs. Today we will receive an overview from the administrator of the Office of Home Energy Programs, and then we'll hear from a number of parties that filed comments. At the end, we'll have a public comment hearing where any interested members of the public may wish to speak on this very important program. We'll take appearances by the parties as the parties present. We have a short agenda today, and I suspect we won't go more than probably an hour and a half. So I would invite the Office of Home Energy Programs Director, Ms. Lauren Molyneux, to the table. Ms. Molyneux replaces longtime Director Bill Freeman. So, Ms. Molyneux, welcome to the Commission and to your new position.
Thank you. Good morning. All right. Are we good to go? Okay, great. Good morning, Chairman Stanek and members of the Commission. My name is Lauren Molyneux. Do you still want me to spell the name? No? Okay, very good. And I'm the Director of the Office of Home Energy Programs at the Maryland Department of Human Services. I would first like to recognize and thank the Public Service Commission and Commission staff for their support and guidance. They have been an incredibly invaluable resource through my transition into this position. I want to also thank the OHEP's local administering agencies, utility partners, advocates, and customers who are the boots on the ground and the true backbone of the work that we do. It is through our network of partners that we are able to ensure Marylanders stay connected to the assistance that they are in fact eligible to receive. As you know, we have seen a great deal of transition within OHEP in the past few years. Today, I would like to discuss strategies being employed and future efforts put in place to ensure that our program is responsive and well equipped with the necessary resources to meet the needs of our customers. For those of you who do not know me, my background is heavily weighted in public safety net programs, and while the transition to the OHEP office has proved to be a challenge, I think my background in assistance programs will be clear in the way that I view accessibility to energy assistance. As you know, the Department of Human Services, through the Office of Home Energy Programs, is responsible for administering the Electric Universal Service Program, or EUSP, and the Maryland Energy Assistance Program, or MEAP. The goal of EUSP is to help make electric bills more affordable for low-income families. There are two components of this program: bill payment assistance and electric arrearage retirement assistance. EUSP bill assistance is funded by electric ratepayers, and the Electric Arrearage Retirement Assistance Program, as well as any additional need for bill payment assistance, is funded through the Regional Greenhouse Gas Initiative, or RGGI, funding by way of the Maryland Strategic Energy Investment Fund. OHEP administers these energy assistance programs through 20 local administering agencies in 24 jurisdictions. Administering agencies consist of governmental and nonprofit organizations. 9 of these agencies administer energy assistance through local departments of social services. 2 are administered via local governments. And the remaining 9 administering agencies are nonprofit community action agencies. These 9 nonprofit community action agencies are under contract with the Department of Human Services to deliver energy assistance services. The statutory income eligibility guidelines limit benefit awards to households with income at or below 175% of the federal poverty guideline and 200% of the federal poverty guideline for those with a household member of 67 years or older. We'll revisit that point in the future. OHEP utilizes a dynamic benefit matrix for calculating benefit amounts. This benefit matrix considers income, household size, housing status, energy use, and utility costs. The matrix is structured so as to provide the highest benefits to the households with the greatest energy burdens. I'd like to take a moment to provide some brief highlights from our past year, my inaugural year into the program. During fiscal year 2022, OHEP provided nearly $61 million to just under 80,000 households for an average EUSP benefit of $761. We also provided a supplemental EUSP payment that provided an additional $150 to $250 to program year 22 participants. While these numbers represent a reduction in households that have applied, I would like to point out that we have seen an increase in our approval rate. In FY22, we saw a 70% application approval rate for bill payment. That is a notable increase from the previous year's approval rate of about 65%. To assist struggling Marylanders with addressing inequitable energy burdens, Governor Larry Hogan signed House Bill 606 during our 21 legislative session to establish a work group tasked with examining the forms of federal, state, local, and private assistance available to low-income residential electric and natural gas customers. The work group, chaired by the Secretary of Human Services, has held 4 public meetings commencing on November 17th of 21. The meetings have been held via Google Meets with call-in information made available on the DHS OHEP website. These meetings gave work group members and interested parties an opportunity to share, learn, and discuss how energy assistance programs function within the state. The kickoff meeting also provided a platform for the National Energy Assistance Directors Association to give a presentation providing the landscape of low-income household energy assistance programs, both nationally and within our own state. We have seen great participation from this work group, and OHEP would like to thank all participating members for the ongoing contributions. We look forward to the additional recommendations that are to be set forth by the work group. In fiscal year 2020, OHEP fully implemented the Critical Medical Needs Program. This was an informal pilot in place since 2015, but has now been codified through unanimously passed legislation signed by our governor. OHEP has completed the centralization of application processing for those qualifying for the Critical Medical Needs Program. So these medically vulnerable households will receive expedited care and assistance. The program works by training navigators in hospitals, cancer centers, and similar facilities. In FY22, OHEP trained an additional 83 navigators. The department is pleased to offer this expedited service to the most vulnerable who can least afford to wait for help as they continue on their treatment journeys. OHEP continues to work to expand the Navigator network to ensure that all patients in need have access to the benefits that will help them stay safe and warm. I would like to thank OPC and the Cancer Foundation, the Cancer Support Foundation, for their continued support in identifying navigators and getting them before us to be appropriately trained. So moving on to the 2023 program year, we endeavor to continue our efforts of reducing application times while also focusing on outreach and engagement strategies to identify eligible households not previously served. We will be addressing outreach and program administration enhancements through the following initiatives: supporting and conducting outreach advising households of the removal of budget billing enrollment for EUSP eligibility. I believe in our plan we had mentioned a September rollout, but we are looking at November. So I just wanted to make note of that. Removing the requirement for households to maintain the bill in their name for EUSP benefits. Collaborating with utilities to identify eligible households and streamline a referral process for OHEP benefits. Launching the Power to the People pilot program with the United Way of Central Maryland and the Fuel Fund of Maryland. This pilot program will establish 2 part-time navigator positions at the United Way 211 call center and 1 part-time navigator position at the Fuel Fund of Maryland in order to further expand access to our Critical Medical Needs Program to applicants who may not have an existing relationship with a navigator within their medical facility. Standardizing the redetermination process as a result of legislation passed this most recent session that works to ensure the most vulnerable have access to the program and any application requirements. OHEP looks forward to seeing the administrative burden reduced for those eligible to utilize the standard redetermination process to maintain their benefits. 3 months into fiscal year 23, and OHEP, well, 2.5, but we'll say 3, is pleased to report a 32% increase in the number of bill payment applications received compared to the previous same point in time last year. I'm hesitant to share approval rates only because of the extra 90 days folks have to turn in documents. So it's not a true representation until probably about October, at which point I'm happy to share those. We also endeavor to work towards the following outcomes this program year: identifying areas for program eligibility alignment across DHS programs, integrating OHEP into the eligibility and enrollment system, and working with utilities to identify opportunities for enhancing the application process through existing APIs and/or additional interfaces as we build out our new eligibility system. I would like to touch on a few developments that will affect EUSP and energy assistance more broadly in the coming year. As we have discussed much leading up to this point, OHEP is looking forward to the integration of energy assistance programs into the eligibility and enrollment platform of MDThink. I am pleased to say that we have started the beginning phases of this work and are currently on schedule to see a statewide rollout in the fall of 2023. The integration is an opportunity to include systems enhancements that will greatly impact the customer experience, including but not limited to real-time interfaces in lieu of paper verifications, document repositories, and of course, enhanced interfaces to communicate usage, services status, and arrearage information between OHEP and the utilities. One outcome of MDThink integration will be an increased participation rate in energy assistance program. This leads me to my second significant development I would like to highlight, which would be funding availability. As the Commission is aware, at least 50% of the revenues generated through RGGI auctions are dedicated to energy assistance. More recent predictions have indicated a steady and sustained increase in funding availability. However, we recognize the challenges in budgeting with historically inconsistent proceeds from RGGI auctions. This gives OHEP the bandwidth to ensure access to EUSP reaches all eligible ratepayers at the most impactful targeted rates and at predictable rates that we can count on year after year. With the additional funding made available through COVID-19 related appropriations, OHEP looks forward to the continuation of the increased minimum benefits, especially during a time in which the cost of living has simply skyrocketed beyond reasonable expectations. Looking forward to fiscal year 23, OHEP believes that the appropriation and the plan as submitted to the Commission for fiscal year 2023 provides adequate funding to serve household number projected to be between 93 to 97,000 at the same benefit level as fiscal year 22. OHEP anticipates the additional RGGI funds will allow more parity between the EUSP and MEEP program as eligibility criteria becomes aligned through mechanisms such as the removal of budget billing requirement, as well as the requirement that the bill is in the applicant's name. OHEP looks forward to participating in discussions to support efforts to protect its program recipients as they engage in Maryland's robust energy supplier marketplace. As regulatory language is finalized, OHEP looks forward to providing additional program year information on myohepstatus.org as an important underpinning to the work of this progressive legislation. Lastly, I would be remiss if I did not mention, amongst the ongoing developments of our state's COVID exit plan, if you will, that we have learned a few lessons from this pandemic. We have seen the instrumental impact of providing a full 30 days of notice ahead of any turnoff activity. As we are all aware, we continue to navigate challenges with remote work, the USPS, staffing challenges, and the variables that make traditional notices a crisis that can be proven to be, if not avoidable, greatly curtailed. I would also like to point out that while arrearages are generally back to pre-pandemic levels, latest data indicates that limited income households actually hold less of that total than they did prior to the pandemic. This data highlights the clear positive impact additional COVID dollars have provided to our limited income households, and I implore all who consider this when assessing the removal and the potential impact and risk faced by these households should they lose certain COVID-related protections. We welcome the opportunity to participate in any discussions regarding our customers and how we can best support these households as we transition to our new normal. This concludes my testimony, and I yield the floor back to Chairman. Thank you for your time.
Thank you for your presentation, Ms. Molyneux. I think that last statistic that you referenced regarding the state of where some of these applicants are is one that we should keep in mind. Just last month, I had the opportunity to spend the morning in the sort of like a day in the life, but just the morning of the life of a OHEP applicant up at a facility off of York Road. And we took a look at the OHEP application, which has since been streamlined, the trifold document, which was very easy for somebody needing assistance to figure out. And then, with the assistance of a navigator, we walked over to the Mayor's Office of Children and Family Success on York Road. And it was not a successful experience. Looking at the door of the social services agency, I needed the help of the navigator to figure out when it's open and when it's closed. And it was like it's open from 11 to 11:45 and then closed for lunch, and you need an appointment at 11:45 to 2 o'clock, and then it's closed for the rest of the day. So particularly in Baltimore City, they've made it exceedingly difficult for folks just to walk in to ask questions if they have that application. And is it my understanding that they would take that paper application and turn it over to the Mayor's Office of Children and Family Success?
Absolutely. The expectation is that the two offices should be communicating together, whether it's regarding energy assistance or the water program as well.
And with 24 jurisdictions in the state, do you get the sense that that's occurring successfully, or I suspect some counties or cities are better than others?
We certainly have high performers across the state. There's opportunities for improvement, and I think the example that you're talking about would be one area where we could certainly streamline the conversation between the two entities. Of course, my goal or hope is that E&E integration will greatly facilitate that process, but technology is not a silver bullet, so we need to make sure that we're putting things in place as well to grow that relationship, if you will, to make it a little bit more symbiotic.
Thank you. Obviously, you can't control the other side of the table, but we recognize you're doing your best. I only have two questions, and then I'll turn to my colleagues. Your source of funding are the CEF RGGI funds, as well as the statutory ratepayer funds, $36 million. At some point in the future, RGGI funds will begin to decrease, and the $36 million in statute is static. Is your office making any plans or projections for these further out years when your source of revenue will begin to decrease? Because right now, in this year, you've received nearly $119 million. Now, while that sounds like a lot, we recognize that we're not reaching all of the eligible populations.
Sure, it's certainly ongoing conversations that we are having internally. How do we want to reach folks who have not been previously reached by this program while still maintaining the robust benefits that Maryland is known to provide? We do provide one of the higher benefits across the country, so we don't want to lose that value when we go to identify folks who have not been previously taking up on the energy assistance program. We're also acutely aware that when we do roll into MDThink, we plan to enact categorical eligibility. So those folks who are receiving SNAP will automatically be eligible for their energy assistance. All we need is a little bit of information from the utility. And ideally, that's something that we can coordinate with the utility, and the customer is completely hands-off in the process. That's our dream. But that is also an expensive dream. And so it is certainly a one that we are undergoing quite a few conversations internally, figuring out how we want to structure the benefit. Do we need to revise the matrix through which we assign benefit amounts, or do we need to look at the availability of other funding sources within the state?
That is a good response, and it's a great segue to my next question. My next question. As we're attempting to balance making the application process easy and streamlined, and the rejection rate is lower than it is now, but at the same time balancing the need for verification that the monies are being directed to people who really need them and not those who are committing fraud on the system. A moment ago, you stated that the program will attempt to take a look at ways to provide OHEP benefits to those persons who the utility bill is not in their name. Up until now, the utility bill needs to be in the name of the OHEP applicant program, if that's my understanding. How is that going to, when that changes and OHEP benefits can be dispersed to persons who are not the utility customer of record, what protections are in place to ensure that that individual is deserving of an OHEP benefit?
Yeah, that's an excellent question, and it's a practice that we modeled after the existing practice with the LIHEAP program. We offer that availability to those as well. So in essence, this is an opportunity to create parity between the two programs. We see a bit of disparity, and we've talked a little bit about maybe it's budget billing, perhaps it's also this requirement that it needs to be in their name. We want to get those numbers as close together as possible. So what we did was we essentially replicated all of the verifications required for the MEEP program, which includes a signed affidavit from their landlord indicating that this money will go to the landlord, and then they will apply it to the resident's bill. So it would be in exceptionally rare cases that a benefit would ever be conveyed directly to an applicant. Majority of the time it's going to a condo association, a landlord, or some other third party who is essentially handling the collection and payment of their bill.
I just have one follow-up question there. Let's say you're in a garden-style apartment building and your rent is $900 a month, utilities are included. You sign that affidavit that you pay your utilities effectively through your rent. The OHEP payment then goes to the landlord?
Correct. And go ahead. The expectation is the landlord would then reduce the rent by that benefit amount.
Okay. Thank you. That's what I would have expected. I think it gets a little complicated, and then the tenant is waiting to get a check from the landlord when they pay their rent, but I suspect they'll figure that out. Again, Ms. Molyneux, thank you. That was a comprehensive summary and a comprehensive proposed operations plan for FY23. I look forward to the other folks testifying today, but now I turn to my colleagues for questions. Commissioner O'Donnell.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good morning, Ms. Molyneux, and congratulations on taking your new position with the Department of Human Resources.
Thank you.
Couple questions.
Sure.
The chairman commented on the positive experience he saw with the trifold application process where when he did a site visit, but last year I expressed some dismay over the online telephone application process. So my first question in that regard is, did your predecessor turn over any of those concerns? Because I expressed them very strongly to him when he was here last year.
Yes, I was made very much aware. And so one of the first things that we discussed in our low-income utility assistance work group was that specific issue, the application process. So we have drafted recommendations, and actually what we did was we had a developer during the last 2 meetings ago walk through the application. So we were able to point out, like, this is a deficiency, this is why this is confusing. And from that meeting, we were able to come up with a really robust set of recommendations to streamline the application. And those recommendations are currently in sign-off process, and as soon as they're approved, I will share them. Happy to
Well,
share them.
good. I think that's important because I think there are a lot of millennials and in the younger generation of people who don't want to fill out a paper application. They don't want to go to an office. They want to do it on their phone. And if they can't do it effectively, it's a problem.
I agree.
So-
I experience similar frustrations. I trust but verify, right? So I have my own personal account, if you will, where I go on and I see if what the developers are sharing with me is what my experience is. Because developers with an IT background see things very differently than someone with a human services background. So I need to make sure that from my lens it makes sense. And sometimes the system will function absolutely as intended, but maybe that intention was misdirected and we need to figure out a better way to get the message across. I also, as a selfly admitted millennial, I struggle with the fact that if I can't do it on my phone, now I have to go on my computer. And that's a whole nother issue. I want to do everything on my phone. So I think there's opportunity there to make the mobile app a bit more efficient as well.
It's important. It's very important. So I'm glad you at least recognize that and are looking at it. Because my experience with that, when my friend showed me, look what I got to do, my mind was blown. It's like
It's
and I get
incredibly
very
challenging.
frustrated with technology, but when
Yeah.
you gotta a person who's graduated with a Bachelor of Science degree from a major state university who can't do it, then you got a problem.
Well, and see, I blame it on my liberal arts degree, but yeah.
Well, this is an engineering student, so,
So yeah, it's
with an education major
it is
as well.
challenging.
So, all right. I think this is the 5th year I've heard we're in the beginning stages of implementing MD Think. I know it's a department-wide program and it's not OHEP, but come on, where's it at? I've watched development of these IT systems through DHR and many other departments over decades, and they just never get off the ground. What's
Yeah.
going on over there with MD Think?
Sure. Well, I can't speak for MD Think as a whole, but the parts that impact OHEP, when I was in my previous position, I oversaw cash programs. So that's your very basic public assistance programs to single moms or folks with disabilities. And we went statewide, I want to say it was fall of last year, that finally SNAP and our cash programs and Medicaid were statewide within the system. That was always the first goal. I think then we had a year in between. There was some transition between myself and my predecessor, where perhaps we lost a little bit of momentum there. I think once we gained a little bit more understanding of the environment that we're facing in OHEP, we were able to make appropriate pushes. And when I say that things have begun to planning has begun with MD Think, I've heard that as well. And I think that was my predecessor's one of his bigger frustrations, right? Like he wanted to see it happen. However, I'm happy to share that we have conducted a few site visits where we have developers actually participating in the application process, because I would like to avoid some things that we saw as we rolled other programs in. I think it's absolutely integral that we have a very intimate relationship between the developers and the actual work on the ground, because there are certain things that I don't want to repeat that I experienced during the pandemic. And I hope that some of this extra planning will create a more seamless process, but I'm also a realist, and I know that this time next year we'll be talking about the struggles of the new system. Or at least I hope that's where we are next year.
I would hope next year the report is we're in beta testing and we're working out the bugs.
So this time next year, we really should be rolling in. So we're going to do not a statewide rollout at once. We'll roll in locals individually. So hopefully we can talk about what their experience is next year.
All right, good. I'm going to hold you to that. Lord willing, the creek don't rise and I'm still here. So. One last question, or maybe some questions regarding your admin expense. You're asking for 12% plus 200,000 plus 400,000. That's a big chunk. It's a big chunk of money. It's millions of dollars, and 12% just feels high to me. My point of reference is charitable organizations. When I think about giving to charities, I look at their overhead and their admin expenses and how much they take off the top to administer their charitable programs. If it's low, that's a good thing. If it starts getting north of 10%, I start looking at it and saying, well, what's going on here? So tell me why your administrative expenses are, in my opinion, relatively high, and what you're doing to contain those costs.
Okay, very good. Your second part of the question was going to be an answer whether you asked for it or not, so I'm glad you did. So this has been a challenge this year, admin costs. As you know, the cost of living has increased substantially, and we do contract out some of our administrative services with local community action agencies. They do fantastic work, but they do not work for free and they don't work for cheap, nor as they should. So we have to respect the challenges that they are facing as well, in terms of keeping staff on board and supplying themselves with the equipment they need to conduct appropriate outreach, to get applications done in time, to be responsive to a crisis. It's one thing when you're talking about just a regular energy assistance application, but when you've got somebody who has a crisis and it's January and they don't have any oil, you need an appropriately staffed office. And even fully funded, these are struggles that folks are still having. I think we're all seeing it in terms of keeping staff on board. There are some recommendations that have been published through a feasibility study that we conducted that made some recommendations on how we can save administrative dollars. And one, to pivot back to what I was originally saying as well, one of the challenges we have with our LIHEAP grant, which also provides some administrative funding, is that it's static. That the grant amount has not changed, and we are limited to how much we can spend through that grant as well. So we have to get creative. How can we turn certain admin functions into things that are inherently outreach, and that's how they should be considered. That is very different than an admin budget item. So there's a couple of different models that we're looking at moving forward to essentially streamline the application process and consolidate the network and essentially standardize what OHEP looks like across the state. So there's clear messaging. Everybody understands it's coming from one office. There's an opportunity to cut down on costs there when you are creating the same message multiple times over instead of multiple messages throughout the state. I'm happy to share that study with you so you can see the actual figures, but we are looking at about $2.5 million savings if we were to move forward with switching up the administrative model.
All right, well, thank you for that response, and this commissioner will appreciate your continued attention to mitigating administrative expenses, so thank you.
Yeah, thank you. I'm a huge proponent of cash to people's hands. It's where I came from, and so any opportunity where I can move things out of that part and redirect into direct benefits, I'm an easy sell.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Commissioner Richard.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And Ms. Molyneux, I thank you for your presentation today and really appreciate the service you provide the state in this important position you're in.
Thank you.
So thank you. Also, congratulations. I think the program has experienced a number of positive results and direction as far as participation and also just the application success rate.
Yeah.
So and most of my questions have really been asked and answered, but I'm interested to know if you had a chance to look over some of the OPC recommendations, specifically on the application process and maybe expanding the opportunities for I guess the definition in your office is vulnerable households to participate in the expedited, streamlined process. And I think that was one of their recommendations. And maybe when you answer that, I'll think of the second one.
Okay, sure. Yeah. So OPC has been incredibly helpful in determining ways that we can improve the application process through the work group. So I just want to make a note that we are very grateful for their continued support. In terms of extending the redetermination process, that expedited application process, to additional populations, we fully intend to move forward with that. And we are looking at having some written policy available probably by the end of the month that will detail exactly who qualifies beyond just what the legislation required us to consider. For me, and to kind of pivot back to Commissioner O'Donnell's point about administrative savings, any opportunity where we can bring more of the caseload into a streamlined application process is a win for everybody. And that is part of the considerations that we make when talking about potential administrative savings. So it's twofold. It's customer service friendly and it's budget friendly.
Good, thank you. And I guess the other recommendation that they brought forward was the telephone signature. I guess they believe that would enhance the customer experience when they went through the telephone process. Is that something that is feasible?
Yeah, absolutely. It's something we are also looking at in addition to a couple of other remote signature options as well, so that we can consider the entire application paperless if we need to. There are certain things on the back end that we are required to complete and write into the application once it's been completed. So we're also looking at digitizing, if you will, that process as well.
Great. Well, thank you very much. And again, I appreciate all the hard work you put into this and the importance of your work. So,
Thank you. I really appreciate that.
okay. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Commissioner Lindsay.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and good morning.
Good morning.
I echo my colleagues' comments regarding the importance of your responsibility, and congratulations as well on starting this new responsibility. This is a very important agency for a number of citizens in Maryland. A lot of my questions were also answered already. I just had one other question regarding what the utilities referenced as an agreed-upon launch date for the removal of budget billing from the EUSP program. In your comments, you explained how the bill assistance benefits are sometimes applied to past due bills. And the budget billing, when it was part of EUSP, did the same thing. But as we know, that won't be the case starting in November going forward. So I'll ask the similar question to the utility companies later when they get up here. So that's just a heads up for you. You didn't get the same heads up, unfortunately, but I think you can handle it. My question now is, what is OHEP doing to prepare for that scenario when you have consumers who are seeking assistance, but the assistance is not enough to cover their past due bills?
So there's a couple of things to consider. First is that each utility has submitted their own plan on how they will effectuate that change. And it was blessed by the Public Service Commission, and of course we took a look at it and said, this is feasible, this works. Moving forward, however, we have made a couple of changes to our arrearage requirements, where, as you know, previously it was a 7-year bar. It has been made 5 years thanks to legislation passed, I think, 2 sessions ago. And then also we have adjusted our vulnerable population waiver to make it more in line with overall criteria in terms of what is the maximum amount of benefit that they can receive. So we've essentially gotten rid of a couple of barriers to access the electric arrearage benefit as well, in conjunction with the bill payment assistance benefit.
Okay, so as part of OHEP's efforts to, as you spoke earlier, I believe it was with the chairman, in response to his questions about integrating with Maryland Think, there is the possibility, or potential at least, that OHEP could have more participants than it has historically. Are you anticipating that there will be an impact on the long-term budget that you're looking to rely on?
Absolutely. And while I was talking about funding for this year being sufficient is certainly a concern moving forward, because as we consider what future benefit amounts are going to look like, there are so many variables that we don't have control over right now, or we don't know. We don't have data to predict. One example would be, how many more folks can we expect to see when we do categorical eligibility, when we streamline the application process, when we make redebts the second nature year after year. And then also, how do we levy the costs that we need to subsidize, essentially, to make that benefit impactful. I think OPC touched on that a little bit about the weight of our benefit. So it's something that we do not take lightly when we think about how do we reach more eligible households with a robust benefit. So it's certainly something that we're going to need to engage in a lot of conversations in the next few years to shore up, so we have an energy assistance program that is dependable and we know what to expect year after year. Other states nationally run shortened programs, or if funding is run out, that is the end of the program. We have seen that in the past in Maryland. It's not been something that we've seen in a very long time. And of course, I think we could all agree we would like to avoid having to tell somebody, we recognize your need, but we just don't have any funds for you. So certainly a lot of planning, I think, needs to go into that conversation and determining how we structure our funding model in the years to come.
Okay, so you also mentioned in your comments, again on the same topic of the bill assistance benefits applying to past due bills, that the data that you're looking for, you're interacting with utility companies to attempt to collect it from them. Have those meetings already started? And if so, how would you characterize them in terms of their success? Do you anticipate being able to get what you need, or is there some challenges?
Yeah, so far we've begun a very infancy, well, I'll let, probably if David comes up to talk, I'll let him talk a little bit more about the project, because it is BG&E's project that we are participating in, so I don't want to take that away from BG&E, but it has been an incredible success so far, and just the development and the consensus that we are coming to in terms of what restrictions do we each have, because our legal teams are so quick to tell us what we cannot do, and then we get creative and we come up with a solution, and it's been a really wonderful experience working that closely with them. So the office is incredibly grateful for that, and I'm hoping we can use that work as somewhat of a springboard to move into other territories and replicate a similar system, and then expand upon what information is given and received in the future.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you very much. I
Thank you.
appreciate the time. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, and thank you, Director Molyneux. If you'd like to remain where you are, we'll bring other parties up at this time.
Thank you.
At this time, I'd like to recognize the Exelon Utilities, both Baltimore Gas and Electric and Pepco Holdings. If you wish to present, we have your comments on the record. If you were not planning to make remarks today, you do not need to.
I don't believe that we were, Mr. Chairman. We're available if you have any questions.
Thank you. Now that you spoke, you need to enter an appearance.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman and Commissioners. Matthew Seegers appearing for Pepco and Delmarva Power.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, Commissioners. Emery Brown, Delmarva Power, Delmarva Pepco.
Good morning, Commissioners. Beverly Sikora, BGE. I also have with me today David Kahn, who's in charge of our assistance programs. We filed comments, and we're just available for questions today.
Great. Thank you to all the utility council and representatives. I will next recognize Office of People's Counsel if they wish to elaborate further on the comments referenced by Commissioner Richard.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman and Commissioners.
You may sit if you'd wish.
Nicole Zeigner on behalf of the Office of People's Counsel.
Ms. Seigner, could you turn your microphone?
Thank you. Thank you. Good morning. The Office of People's Counsel appreciates the opportunity to provide comments on behalf of regarding the OHEP plan for fiscal year 2023. We would like to begin by recognizing the critical work performed by the Office of Home Energy Programs. The EUSP program provides valuable assistance to Marylanders by helping them to maintain electric service, thus reducing the likelihood of weather-related health consequences, as well as other hardships faced by those who lose electric service. An April 2016 ACEEE report titled Lifting the High Energy Burden in America's Largest Cities, How Energy Efficiency Can Improve Low-Income and Underserved Communities, noted that researchers found that utility shutoffs were one of the primary reasons for homelessness in 3 jurisdictions that they studied. The value of this program cannot be overstated. OPC is pleased by the significant increase in funds that are available for fiscal year 2023. Over $50 million in additional funds is allocated for fiscal year 2023 than in fiscal year 2022 due to RGGI auction proceeds. At the same time, OHEP has explained that its arrearage supplemental grant and the Relief Act funds distributed by the Commission led to a decrease in the number of applications for energy assistance in fiscal year 2022, with EUSP arrearage retirement benefits increasing by 17.3% during that time frame. It is encouraging that many more ratepayers were able to benefit from arrearage retirement during this time. We also recognize that these funds are temporary in nature, and we share some of the concerns raised by the Commission regarding what will happen in the future if RGGI auction proceeds decrease. There are 3 primary reasons why additional funding is warranted at this time. First, there continues to be a significant unmet need for energy assistance in Maryland. Energy burden, or a household's annual energy cost expressed as a percentage of annual household income, should not exceed 6%. 6% is a generally accepted metric for energy affordability. A 2018 study by Apprise Inc., commissioned by OPC, found that at that time, the average energy burden of those who received both MEEP and EUSP benefits was still 9%. Although the gross energy burden for these households was 15% prior to the receipt of those benefits, we still haven't attained 6% with those benefits. Apprise's report was appended to OPC's comments as Attachment 1. Second, recently codified legislation has made the EUSP application process more accessible and user-friendly. We're very happy to see these changes, and we realize that this is a positive step that was greatly needed, as application barriers contribute to the relatively low utilization rate of the USP among eligible households. In its 2018 report for OPC, Apprise found that only approximately 25% of income-eligible households were participating in the EUSP program. Maryland Code Human Services Article Section 5-5A-09, which will take effect on October 1st, streamlines the application process for those 65 years of age and older. Additional legislation under Public Utility Article Section 7-512.1-8I allows applicants at least 3 months to provide missing documents before an application is denied due to lack of documentation. We expect these changes to function as intended and cause more successful applications, and we feel that additional funding will be needed to serve new program recipients. And this does seem like a concern that OHEP recognizes as well. And Director Molyneux has touched on some of these difficult decisions that it may have to make if funding is not increased. Right now there's a relatively high benefit, as Director Molyneux pointed out, but if funding does not increase in the future, OHEP may be forced to make difficult decisions where it would have to decrease the benefit amount, and we would like to avoid that. Maryland's commitment to broader electrification of both existing buildings and new construction as a component of decarbonization, highlighted in the Climate Solutions Now Act of 2022, provides another reason why an increase in funding is needed for the EUSP program. The Climate Solutions Now Act establishes a Building Energy Transition Implementation Task Force that, among other duties, is authorized to consider financial incentives to support all aspects of the transition to electrified buildings and the establishment of low-income household holistic retrofit targets and heat pump sales targets. If Maryland is to meet its climate goals, it will be necessary to devote resources to the electrification of low-income households' buildings. Increasing funding for the EUSP program would be both consistent with the goals of the Climate Solution Now Act and beneficial to low-income ratepayers. We feel that now is the time to help low-income households prepare for Maryland's transition to electrification. Although OPC believes that increased funding is necessary in order for the EUSP program to continue to serve low-income customers, there are also programmatic changes that could be made to increase the efficacy of the program. And we realize that Director Molyneux has touched on some of them, and we're happy to hear that there may be changes in the works. First, as pointed out, Human Services Article Section 5-5A-09 should be applied to all customers. That's OPC's recommendation. And it sounds like there's consideration of that happening, and we're happy to hear that. And additionally, we feel that it's necessary to integrate as soon as possible EUSP applications with the Maryland Think program. We are concerned about the time that it's taken to do this. We understand this is probably a very complicated process, but we feel like this should be a top priority, as well as categorical eligibility. And we think that those two things would help serve additional ratepayers, additional individuals, and would also help EUSP reach its goals. Finally, OPC supports a policy that would allow applications to be signed over the phone, and this has also been addressed by Director Molyneux, and we're also happy to hear that they're looking into that. That would greatly increase accessibility for people who are homebound, people who have young children, people who have trouble with transportation. We feel that that would be a simple solution and would greatly help this program. In sum, OPC is pleased by the additional funding available this year and believes that the recent changes to the application process will allow these funds to be put to good use. OPC's strong preference is that additional funding is made available and that funding comes through general funds or RGGI, but not through ratepayers. Further changes could increase program efficacy and serve even more Marylanders. And again, OPC recognizes the valuable work performed by OHEP and looks forward to continued program improvements and continued collaboration with OHEP. Thank you very much, and I'm available for any comments.
Thank you, Ms. Zeichner, for your summary of your written comments. It appears that many of the procedural changes that you seek are under consideration now, so I won't need to discuss that. I think you've responded to Commissioner Richard adequately. You spend a lot of time in your oral and written comments with respect to increased funding. And of course, this commission does not have, we don't determine the funding. That's either by statute or what's received through the CEF via the RGGI proceeds. Obviously, as this state moves towards cleaner fuels, cleaner electrification, our RGGI proceeds by design will begin to decline. So when you make these arguments regarding increased funding, and you said not via ratepayers, but via additional CEF funds, does this commission have any authority or insight into how that would occur? Or are you just flagging this information for our information purposes only?
Yes. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We do believe that the Commission is able to make funding recommendations to the General Assembly pursuant to Public Utilities Article Section 7512.1 C1. And I believe that this could be included, it would be within the Commission's purview to include this in its report to the General Assembly. And the Commission may wish to propose a certain source of funding or not, but I do believe it would be appropriate for the Commission to say that either additional funding is needed or not.
We'll go off the record for one moment. Edward, is there a problem?
Test.
Testing 1, 2, 3. We're back on. Okay. Well, Ms. Eichner, of course, we could make recommendations to the General Assembly. Although I know for a fact there are many legislators that are keeping a close eye on the CEF for their own programs and the revenue. Obviously, some of the revenue has to assist low-income utility customers, but not all of it. So there will be a fierce competition for resources. I would say we are blessed. We are fortunate to be a very wealthy state. In fact, I think we're the #1 state in the country in terms of the highest household income. And yet we still have a tremendous amount of need for either ratepayer or taxpayer support for these programs. Of course, there's only so much that ratepayers and taxpayers can bear. Although the commission will take your recommendation under advisement to compete for these very scarce resources. Additional questions for OPC, Commissioner O'Donnell.
Just a follow-up. Mrs. Eigner, following up on the chairman's question and commentary, will the Office of People's Counsel be making a recommendation to the legislature? The office seems to be in Annapolis a lot and talking to a lot of legislators all the time. So will you be making a recommendation to?
I would have to discuss that internally with the office, but we do believe this is a very important program, and that is something to consider. And I will discuss that internally with the office.
Very good. Sometimes the Attorney General's office vis-a-vis the Office of People's Counsel could have an impact, as you have a lot of influence with the political connections you've developed, your office has developed in Annapolis. Thank you.
Thank you.
Commissioner Richard.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for your testimony today and for your report. I guess a lot of the questions have already been asked and answered, and again, as we're looking to the future, hopefully we are successful at increasing participation rates, and also that we'll see successful applications, but that will mean that there's going to be a requirement for additional funds. You've brought to us a number of times over the years this discussion about the energy burden and how we need to look at 6% as the cap for every Maryland home. Do you see EUSP as the program to address that, or are there other initiatives that we need to be considering, again, to try to achieve that energy burden goal?
I think, Commissioner Richard, that's a good question, and I do feel that a more comprehensive approach would be appropriate, and the question is exactly what would that be? And this is something we discuss frequently and we're thinking about, and we actually are looking into this further actively. We have a consultant looking into this a little bit more. So I can't answer that today, but I do think this is a good start, but I agree that this is a larger issue, and in fact, when we consider the state's electrification goals, the state's intent, it appears to move towards electrification for low-income households. It does seem that a comprehensive approach will be necessary, but exactly what that is, I don't know today.
Okay, well, thank you for that candid answer. That was kind of my impression as well. We can try to do what we can with the EUSP program, but I believe we need to probably have further proceedings to really discuss how we achieve, I think, that important goal of the energy burden no greater than 6%. So thank you very much.
Thank
you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Commissioner Linton.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Most of my questions are already answered again. It's the benefit of going last, I guess. But I didn't have anything else, so no questions.
Thank you, Commissioner. Thank you, Ms. Eichner. Finally, we'll hear from the Commission's technical staff if they wish to make a presentation. Ms. Garofalo.
Very brief. Good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the Commission. Annette Garofalo on behalf of Commission staff. As noted in our comments, staff supports OHEP's budget and by implication its fiscal year 2023 plan. In many ways, staff believes OHEP is in a stronger position today than in past years due to the arrearage payments made as a result of the Relief Act, which was occasioned by circumstances surrounding COVID-19. In addition, OHEP anticipates sufficient funds, which have been increased this year, and will allow them to pay up to 95% of the electric cost of its participants in poverty levels 1 and 2, and 90% of the electric cost of participants in poverty levels 3 and 4. Of concern is the declining enrollment in the EOSP, although there is some indication that circumstances surrounding COVID-19 and the prohibition on terminations was somehow related to this decline. Moreover, to the extent categorical enrollment is enabled by Project Think, this trend could be quickly reversed. Staff makes no proposals for changes in the EOSP, but remains ready to assist OHEP to the extent needed and appropriate.
You weren't kidding. Thank you, Ms. Garofalo. Any questions for our staff counsel?
I'll just opine that when someone says I'll be brief, that's usually a death knell for a long, winded presentation. So thank you, Ms. Garofalo.
My pleasure.
Just a very quick question, Mr. Chairman. And good morning, Ms. Garofalo. The People's Council had mentioned that there was legislation proposed to give consumers 90 days to correct their application. Historically, there used to be a 55-day hold that was really just more of an informal agreement. What's your understanding as to how those two interplay with each other?
Oh, that's a good question. I think they're separate. I think the 55-day hold will remain, but not be tacked on to the 90 days, if that's what you were asking. But the 90 days might create a little bit of a record-keeping problem because it goes outside the fiscal year, but I think that's certainly outside my hands, and I think we'll just have to live with that. I think it probably does make things easier for potential participants in the EOSP.
Okay, thank you. That's all I had, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, and thank you to all of the parties today. The Commission will consider the report filed by OHEP back in July, as well as all the comments and the testimony that we received today, and will issue an order in the near future. With that, today's hearing is now adjourned.